First Contact and Revelation. High Counselor Zephyra of the Veldari Collective stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmonious Dawn, her slender six-fingered hands clasped behind her back as she gazed at the stars. The 17 worlds of the Veldari had known peace for nearly 8 centuries, their confederation growing to include 5 other species in what they proudly called the Stellar Concord. High Counselor, the anomaly has changed course. It appears to be approaching our position directly, reported First Observer Thalen, his luminescent skin pulsing with the blue-green pattern of concern. Zephyra turned, her own skin reflecting calm lavender despite her inner uncertainty. Still no response to our communication attempts. None, High Counselor. The vessel, if that is indeed what it is, maintains its approach. Energy readings are inconsistent with our understanding of propulsion technology. For 3 cycles, their deep space monitoring stations had tracked the object moving through the void between stars at velocities that should have been impossible. The Concord scientists were baffled, some suggesting it might be a natural phenomenon rather than an artificial construct. Magnify, Zephyra ordered, and the main viewing panel shifted to show a distant pinpoint of light. As they watched, the point grew larger, resolving into a definite shape that eliminated any doubt about its nature. It was a vessel, and unlike anything the Concord had ever encountered. Where Veldari ships were elegant curved structures of crystalline alloys and bioengineered living metal, this craft was angular, imposing, and unmistakably designed with purpose rather than aesthetic harmony. Dark metal plates covered its hull, interrupted by what appeared to be observation ports, and most disturbingly, what could only be weapon emplacements. By the ancestral light, whispered Thalen, those are weapons. The concept was almost foreign to the Veldari. Their vessels carried defensive shields, of course, but offensive weaponry had been largely ceremonial for centuries. The very idea of a ship designed primarily for combat rather than exploration or transportation was disturbing. Receiving transmission, announced communications specialist Ilara, her fingers dancing across the control interface. Unknown language pattern, initiating translation matrix. The main communication screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that caused several crew members to step back involuntarily. The being on the screen was Bictal, with a hard face lacking the luminescent qualities of any Concord species. Its skin was a solid brown-pink tone, with short dark fur atop its head. Most notable were its eyes, forward-facing predator eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Federation vessel Sentinel, came the translated voice, deep and confident. We come in peace and request permission to approach and establish diplomatic relations. Zephyra straightened her ceremonial robes and stepped forward. I am High Counselor Zephyra of the Veldari Collective, representing the Stellar Concord. We welcome peaceful contact, though we note your vessel's unusual configuration. The human's expression shifted slightly. Was that amusement? We understand your concern, High Counselor. Humanity has learned to be prepared for all possibilities when venturing into the unknown. I assure you our intentions are peaceful. Then perhaps you would consent to boarding our vessel for initial diplomatic exchange. Our sensors indicate your ship carries energy weapons far exceeding defensive requirements for exploration. Captain Vasquez nodded. We would be honored. And yes, the Sentinel is a military vessel, a destroyer-class warship. We find it prudent to lead our exploration efforts with ships capable of defending themselves and others if necessary. The revelation sent a ripple of color cascading through the Veldari crew. A warship, a vessel designed primarily for combat, had entered their space, yet claimed peaceful intentions. Within hours, a smaller craft departed from the human vessel and docked with the Harmonious Dawn. Captain Vasquez emerged with 3 other humans, all wearing formal attire that nonetheless had a distinctly military bearing. They were escorted to the contemplation chamber, where the Veldari Council had assembled hastily. Your vessel disturbs us, Captain. Elder Counselor Malon stated bluntly after formal introductions were complete. In all our centuries of space exploration and contact with other species, we have never encountered a civilization that leads with weapons rather than words. Captain Vasquez exchanged glances with her officers before responding. With respect, Elder Counselor, humanity's history has taught us difficult lessons about preparedness. We explored our own solar system with scientific vessels at first, but when we began venturing to nearby stars, we encountered hostility. Other spacefaring civilizations? Zephyra asked, leaning forward with interest. The Concorde had catalogued dozens of pre-spaceflight species, but had believed themselves and their allies to be the only advanced civilization in this sector of the galaxy. Not civilizations, Vasquez corrected, her expression darkening. Something else. We call them the Ravagers. They appear to be a hive mind species that consumes all organic material on planets they encounter. They destroy our first 3 colony worlds before we even understood what was happening. The chamber fell silent. The concept of such wholesale destruction was almost incomprehensible to the Veldari, whose evolutionary path had emphasized cooperation and symbiosis rather than competition. We've been fighting them for 30 years, continued Commander Reyes, the Sentinel's second-in-command, pushing them back from human space, tracking their movements, studying their biology and behavior. We believe they're moving in this direction. Impossible, declared Science Minister Valen. Our long-range sensors would have detected such a threat. Would they? Asked Vasquez quietly. The Ravagers use biological ships that absorb rather than reflect most scanning frequencies. They're practically invisible until they're close enough to attack. We've developed specialized detection systems, but it took us years of studying their remains. She activated a small projector, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a star map of the sector, with a highlighted path moving steadily toward Concorde space. This is their current trajectory based on our analysis. They'll reach the outer systems of your territory within 60 days. When they do, they'll begin consuming everything in their path: plants, animals, people. They don't negotiate. They don't communicate. They consume. The colors of fear and disbelief washed across the chamber as the Veldari Council members processed this information. Zephyra maintained her composure, though her skin had paled to a worried white. If what you say is true, why come to us with just one ship? She asked. Surely warning us of such a threat would warrant a larger diplomatic mission. Captain Vasquez's lips curved into what humans call a smile, though it contained little humor. The Sentinel isn't alone, High Counselor. It's the advanced scout for Battle Group Aegis. 12 warships currently holding position at the edge of your sensor range. We didn't want to alarm you by arriving with a fleet. The revelation struck the Council like a physical blow. 12 warships. The entire Veldari Defense Force consisted of 20 vessels, none designed for true combat operations. You speak of peace while bringing warships to our doorstep. Elder Malin's skin flashed angry red. We bring protection, Vasquez countered firmly. Humanity has learned through blood and loss that the galaxy is not always kind to those unprepared for its dangers. We could have let you discover the Ravagers on your own, but that isn't our way. Lieutenant Commander Ishikawa, the Sentinel's tactical officer, stepped forward. Our analysis of your defensive capabilities suggests your current forces would be overwhelmed within days of first contact with the Ravagers. We're offering alliance and protection. At what cost? Asked Zephyra, her diplomatic training asserting itself through the shock. Knowledge exchange, Vasquez replied. Your biotechnology is centuries ahead of ours. Our weapons and defensive systems are similarly advanced beyond yours. Together, we would be stronger than either is alone. Before the Council could respond, an urgent signal chimed through the chamber. First Observer Thalen activated a communication panel, his skin flashing alarmed patterns as he received the message. High Counselor, he said, voice strained, Outpost Celestial Horizon at the rim of the Helix Nebula has gone silent. Last transmission reported unknown biological entities approaching the station. Captain Vasquez stood immediately, her posture shifting from diplomatic to commanding in an instant. The Ravagers are already here. They're moving faster than we anticipated. She touched a communication device on her wrist. Sentinel, this is the captain. Signal Battle Group Aegis to move to combat formation at the Helix Nebula coordinates. She turned to the stunned council. High Counselor Zephyra, I regret that our warnings came too late for preparation. The choice now is simple. Allow us to defend your territory alongside whatever forces you can muster, or face the Ravagers alone. Zephyra looked around at her council, seeing the shock and fear rippling across their luminescent skin. In 8 centuries of peace, the Veldari had never faced such a decision. We are not warriors, Captain Vasquez, she said finally. Few species are, by nature, the human captain replied. Most become warriors by necessity. Humanity will fight for you, but will be more effective fighting with you. Zephyra's skin shifted to the deep blue of resolve. Then it seems, Captain, that the Stellar Concord must learn what your humanity already knows, how to defend that which we cherish. As alarms began to sound throughout the harmonious dawn, the first chapter in a new relationship between humans and Veldari began, one forged in the approaching shadow of a threat neither fully understood, but that humans had learned to fight through bitter experience. The age of peace for the Stellar Concord was ending. The age of necessity was about to begin. Battle and alliance. The Veldari command ship, Radiant Harmony, shuddered as another energy pulse washed over its shields. High Counselor Zephyra steadied herself against a control panel, her luminescent skin flickering with stress patterns she couldn't fully suppress. Shield integrity at 47%, reported Defense Coordinator Naylan, his voice remarkably steady despite the chaos around them. The biological vessels are concentrating their attacks on our aft sections. It had been less than 20 hours since the human captain's warning. 20 hours since the peaceful Veldari collective had been forced to acknowledge that their centuries of harmony had left them desperately unprepared for conflict. The main tactical display showed the battle unfolding across the Helix Nebula's outer boundary. Dozens of Ravager bioships, writhing, asymmetrical monstrosities that resembled massive deep-sea predators more than spacecraft, had emerged from what the humans called subspace folds. They had immediately targeted the nearest Veldari outposts and ships, ignoring all communication attempts. High Counselor, called Communications Specialist Ilara, Captain Vasquez, is requesting permission to move through our defensive line. Zephyra hesitated only briefly. Granted. On the tactical display, the human vessel Sentinel accelerated with shocking speed, its engines flaring bright against the backdrop of space. Unlike the Veldari ships, which relied on gravitational manipulation for propulsion, the human vessel used some form of reaction drive that produced both tremendous velocity and maneuverability. "What are they doing?" asked Elder Malin, who had insisted on remaining aboard despite the danger. "They're heading directly toward the largest enemy concentration." As they watched, the Sentinel executed a series of tight maneuvers that seemed impossible for a vessel of its size, evading the grasping tendrils of energy the Ravager ships projected. Then it did something that made every Veldari officer on the bridge freeze in stunned silence. It opened fire. Not with the defensive energy pulses the Veldari used to discourage aggressors, but with weapons designed specifically to destroy. Lances of coherent energy sliced through the organic hulls of the nearest Ravager vessels, causing them to convulse and leak biological matter into space. Projectiles that left visible distortions in space around them as they traveled impacted others, detonating with forces that tore the creatures apart from within. "By the ancestral light," whispered Thelen, "they're annihilating them." The Sentinel carved a path through the Ravager formation with methodical precision, targeting what appeared to be nerve clusters and vital organs in the biological ships. Where the Veldari vessels had been struggling to maintain their shields against the Ravager attacks, the human ship actively hunted its opponents. "Human Battle Group Aegis has arrived," announced Ilara, her voice tinged with both relief and apprehension. The tactical display updated to show 11 more human warships emerging from faster-than-light travel. Unlike the Veldari fleet, with its uniform design philosophy, each human vessel appeared unique in configuration. Some were massive and bristling with weapon systems, while others were sleek and swift, clearly designed for different combat roles. They moved with the coordination of predators that had evolved to hunt in packs, supporting each other's movements and covering vulnerabilities. It was both terrifying and awe-inspiring to witness. "Captain Vasquez is hailing us," said Ilara. The main communication screen activated to show the human captain. Her formal attire had been replaced by what was clearly a combat uniform, and a thin line of red human blood ran from a cut on her forehead. "High Counselor," she said without preamble, "we're engaging the main Ravager force, but we've detected smaller bioships breaking through toward your civilian habitats. We're dispatching intercept vessels, but your ships need to reinforce that sector." Zafira nodded, turning to her tactical officers. "Redirect the 3rd and 5th defensive clusters to protect the habitats." She turned back to the screen. "Captain, your vessel's capabilities exceed anything in our historical records. We are grateful, though disturbed." Vasquez's expression softened slightly. "I understand. Combat is ugly, necessary though it sometimes is. Have your science officers analyze the Ravager remains. You'll find they're not sentient as you would define it. They're biological weapons created by something else, something we haven't identified yet." This revelation sent ripples of color through the command crew. "Created?" asked Science Minister Valen, stepping into view of the communication array. "You mean they're artificial?" "Semi-artificial," Vasquez corrected. "Like biological robots with limited autonomous function. That's why they don't communicate or negotiate. They're tools, not beings." A tremendous explosion rocked the radiant harmony before Valen could respond. Warning signals flashed across control panels as crew members struggled to maintain their positions. "Direct hit to our primary propulsion system," reported Engineering Lays and Severin. "We're losing maneuverability." On the screen, Captain Vasquez barked orders to someone off-camera before returning her attention to the Veldari. "We're dispatching engineering teams to your vessel. In the meantime, the Valkyrie will provide cover for you." She hesitated, then added, "High Counselor, with respect, your people need to fight back more effectively. Your defensive posture is leaving you vulnerable." "We have limited offensive capabilities," Zafira admitted, her skin flushing with embarrassment. "Then use what you have creatively," Vasquez insisted. "Your ships have gravitational manipulation drives. Turn them into weapons. Create gravitational shear forces between the Ravagers. Your shield technology can be modified to project outward instead of just forming barriers. Adaptation is how species survive." The communication cut off as the human returned to battle coordination. Zafira turned to her council members, seeing the shocked patterns playing across their skin. "She's right," Science Minister Valen said slowly. "We've never considered weaponizing our technology because we've never needed to, but the principles are sound. To do so would violate 8 centuries of Veldari philosophy," protested Elder Malon. Zafira watched the tactical display, where human vessels were systematically dismantling the Ravager assault, while Veldari ships focused primarily on staying alive. The contrast was stark and humbling. "Philosophy means nothing if there are no Veldari left to practice it," she said firmly. "Minister Valen, coordinate with our engineers. Repurpose our technology as Captain Vasquez suggested. All ships are to adopt a more aggressive posture immediately." Within minutes, the Veldari fleet began to change its approach. Ships that had been maintaining static defensive positions began to maneuver actively, using their gravitational drives to create distortion fields that tore at the organic structure of the Ravager vessels. Shields that had been purely defensive began to pulse outward in concentrated bursts, disrupting the energy weapons of their attackers. A small human vessel, the markings identified it as the Valkyrie, moved into position alongside the damaged Radiant Harmony, its weapon systems creating a protective envelope around the Veldari flagship. A transport shuttle departed from the human ship, docking with the Veldari vessel moments later. The shuttle doors opened to reveal 6 humans in environmental suits, carrying equipment unfamiliar to the Veldari engineers who met them. The lead human removed her helmet, revealing a woman with dark skin and cropped hair. Commander Maya Rodriguez, chief engineer of the Valkyrie. She introduced herself briskly. "We've brought emergency repair modules and propulsion stabilizers. With your permission, we'll help get your engines back online." The Veldari engineering team, led by Severin, exchanged uncertain glances before nodding. "We welcome your assistance, Commander. Our systems are unlike yours." "We've studied your propulsion technology from our scans," Rodriguez interrupted, already moving toward the engine control room. "Fascinating application of quantum field manipulation. Elegant, but currently too focused on stability rather than adaptability. We can modify your field controllers to increase maneuverability while maintaining shield integrity." As the human engineering team integrated with their Veldari counterparts, another group of humans arrived on the bridge. Combat specialists in armor that enhanced their already intimidating physical presence. Lieutenant Commander Jackson. Tactical support. The lead officer introduced himself to Zephyra. "Captain Vasquez sent us to help coordinate your fleet movements with ours. Your ships are performing better, but we're still seeing gaps in the defensive coverage." Over the next hour, humans and Veldari worked side by side across the fleet. The humans brought combat experience and technological adaptations developed through decades of war, while the Veldari contributed their deep understanding of the underlying scientific principles and their ship's capabilities. In the engine room, Commander Rodriguez's team had not only repaired the damaged propulsion system, but had modified it to generate focused gravitational pulses that could be directed as weapons. "It's not pretty," she explained to Severin as they finalized the calibrations, "but it'll tear those bioships apart from the inside. The gravitic shear will rupture their cellular structures faster than they can regenerate." On the bridge, Lieutenant Commander Jackson worked with the Veldari tactical officers to reorganize their fleet formation. "Your ships are more maneuverable than ours in certain vectors," he explained. "Use that to flank the Ravagers while our heavier vessels draw their fire. Create crossfire situations, here and here." He indicated points on the tactical display where Ravager ships would be caught between coordinated attacks. Gradually, the tide of battle began to turn. Veldari vessels that had been merely surviving now actively contributed to the Ravager's destruction. The modified gravitational drives proved particularly effective, creating localized distortions that twisted the organic ships beyond their structural tolerance. "We're detecting a change in the Ravager formation," reported First Observer Thalen, studying the sensor readings. "They appear to be retreating." "Not retreating," corrected Lieutenant Commander Jackson. "Regrouping. That larger vessel at the center of their formation is what we call a Nexus. It coordinates the others. They're pulling back to protect it." Captain Vasquez's voice came through the communication system. "Battle Group Aegis has identified the Ravager Nexus. We're moving to engage, but we need your remaining ships to contain the outlying bioships. Don't let them escape to regroup elsewhere." Zephyra made her decision without hesitation. All Veldari vessels moved to intercept positions as indicated by Tactical Officer Nalen. Prevent any Ravager vessel from breaking formation. On the tactical display, the human warships formed an attack pattern and drove straight toward the heart of the Ravager fleet. The largest human vessel, identified as the Thermopylae, led the charge, its massive weapon systems tearing through the protective screen of bioships surrounding the Nexus. The battle reached its climax as the combined human Veldari forces converged on the Ravager command structure. The human ships methodically destroyed the outer defensive layers while the Veldari vessels, now employing their gravitational weapons effectively, prevented any escape. When the Thermopylae finally brought its main weapons to bear on the Nexus itself, the resulting explosion was almost blinding even on the filtered tactical display. As the Nexus disintegrated, the remaining Ravager vessels seemed to spasm uncontrollably, their coordinated movements degenerating into chaotic thrashing. "Just as we predicted," said Lieutenant Commander Jackson with grim satisfaction. "Without the Nexus, they can't maintain cohesion. Mop-up operations can begin now." 3 hours later, the last Ravager bioship had been reduced to drifting organic. "The Stellar Concord owes you a debt we cannot easily repay," Zephyra acknowledged, her skin glowing with the deep gold of sincere gratitude. "Without your intervention, we would have faced extinction." Admiral Chen, an older human with streaks of gray in her short hair, nodded respectfully. "Humanity remembers what it's like to face the Ravagers alone. We lost 3 colony worlds before we developed effective countermeasures. If we can spare others that experience, we will." "Your people adapted remarkably quickly," added Captain Vasquez. "The modifications you made to your gravitational drives were ingenious. Our engineers are already studying the principles for potential applications to our own systems." Science Minister Valen's skin flushed with pride. Necessity proved a powerful motivator. In centuries of peace, we never considered how our technology might be repurposed. "That is both your greatest strength and weakness," observed Admiral Chen. "Your society evolved without the constant pressure of conflict that shaped humanity. You developed technologies based on harmony and cooperation, rather than competition and defense. While humans," continued Zephyra, understanding dawning, "evolved under pressures that made you natural warriors, even as you sought peace." "We're not natural warriors," Vasquez corrected gently. "We're natural survivors. There's a difference. War isn't our preference. It's simply something we've learned to do well when necessary." Elder Malin, who had remained silent through much of the exchange, finally spoke. "Your arrival has changed the Stellar Concord forever. We cannot return to our former state of innocent peace, knowing what exists beyond our borders." "No," agreed Admiral Chen. "But perhaps you don't need to. Humanity's path has been shaped by conflict, yes, but also by the dream of eventually moving beyond it. We build warships while hoping our grandchildren will only need exploration vessels." "Perhaps," suggested Zephyra, her skin shifting to the thoughtful blue-purple of possibility, "our peoples have something profound to learn from each other. You can teach us to survive in a universe more dangerous than we imagined, while we can remind you of the harmony that survival ultimately serves." Captain Vasquez smiled, a genuine expression of warmth rather than the grim determination she had shown in battle. "I believe that's the foundation of a true alliance, High Counselor. Not just mutual protection, but mutual growth." As the Radiant Harmony and the Sentinel began the journey back to Veldari Prime, escorted by ships from both fleets flying in formation, a new chapter in galactic history had begun. One written not in the language of conquest or submission, but in the complex dialect of species learning from one another's strengths and compensating for each other's vulnerabilities. Humanity had brought shields to protect the peaceful Veldari, but in doing so, they had found something they hadn't realized they were seeking, a reminder of what peace could look like when it wasn't just the exhausted pause between conflicts. For the Veldari, the humans represented a disturbing but necessary awakening to the realities of a dangerous universe. For the humans, the Veldari offered a glimpse of what might be possible when survival was no longer the primary imperative. Together, they faced the stars with new perspective, the warriors who dreamed of peace, and the peacekeepers who had learned to fight when necessary. Neither would ever be quite the same again, and the galaxy would be better for it.